You often hear me talk about how important the human side of working with dog aggression is so crucial to understand, and the need for empathy and kindness for the humans involved as well as the dogs. Conflict resolution is a much needed skill, not only for dog behavior consulting and aggression cases, but I think for life in general. Carmaleta Aufderheide joins me for this episode to take a deep dive into the topic of conflict resolution, what it is, and how we can use this important skill to navigate difficult conversations. Carm has a master's in conflict resolution, is a KPA CTP, a CPDTKA, and a CSAT, or separation anxiety trainer. She specializes in applied conflict resolution and positive reinforcement training. Carm brings her knowledge in positive reinforcement techniques to complex behavior problems, ensuring effective and humane training practices. She leverages academic insights to address and resolve conflicts within professional dog training to facilitate better training outcomes. Over the past decade, her mission has been to improve client communication, connection, training compliance, and navigating difficult conversations with compassion and understanding by applying simple tools to the trade in conflict resolution to optimize outcomes. And if you are enjoying the Bitey End of the Dog, you can support the podcast by going to aggressivedog.com, where there's a variety of resources to learn more about helping dogs with aggression issues, including the upcoming Aggression in Dogs Conference happening from October 11th to 13th, 2024 in Scottsdale, Arizona, with both in-person and online options. You can also learn more about the Aggression in Dogs Master Course, which is the most comprehensive course available anywhere in the world for learning how to work with and help dogs with aggression issues. I also have a wide variety of webinars, upcoming courses, videos, and articles, all from the foremost experts in training and behavior. We are your one-stop shop for all things related to aggression in dogs. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bitey End of the Dog. We've got a very special topic this week. It's on conflict resolution, and I can't think of anybody else better to talk about this, especially in our community. Carm Aufderheide is here with us, so welcome, Carm.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here, Mike. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast and to give me a platform and opportunity to bring conflict resolution and a few suggestions, skills, tips to people that I think they'll find helpful in how they're working with their clients.
Yes, I think this is such a much needed topic to talk about in our community because of all the problems we can face and the issues and the struggles. So let's start with, what got you into this kind of work? So were you training first, or are you doing other kind of work? What is your background in this?
It's such a great question. I am a late bloomer. I consider myself a late bloomer in life, and I got into conflict resolution before I was a trainer, which is why it had such a heavy influence into how I started practicing and started training. The story of how I got into conflict resolution is pretty interesting. I go ahead and I pursue conflict resolution. I apply to the program. I get in. Surprise to me. Surprise, surprise. Couldn't believe I actually got in. But I did because I thought I was just too old. And I thought they're going to say, oh, good try. but I get in. And I had a lovely, lovely golden retriever at the time. And this dog was my heart dog. And I had never experienced a connection and a human-animal bond in the way that I had with this dog. So about a week prior to starting the program, Jake was his name, got diagnosed with a hemangiosarcoma, and 3 days before starting the program, he was gone. And I felt sucker punched, and I honestly, truly didn't think I could do the program without him. I didn't think I could do it without this dog at my side because we were so connected. And I leaned into him probably more than I ever realized I did, like most people do with their dog when they have this kind of connection. I had never experienced that. And so what I did is I went ahead and I started the program. It was horrible. It was in total grief. And I decided somewhere, somehow, I was going to figure out how to merge the world of dogs and conflict resolution together. And the program director at the time said, good luck. Nobody's ever done anything like that. I don't know how you're going to do it, but let's see what happens. So I had pursued and did then research in prison animal programming. And I was looking specifically at the human-animal bond. It took an additional year in the program to do it, but I went to 3 different prisons in 3 different states, one in Louisiana, one in Iowa, and one in my home state here of Oregon. And I sat and interviewed inmates who were either raising dogs for service because I wanted that longer term relationship. I wanted to know what the impact was. I wanted to hear their stories from their side about the restorative processes that occur as a result of this work. And then I additionally was able to connect with a program where a humane society is being run out of a prison system in Louisiana, which was incredible and amazing. And so when I started, that really precipitated my training career. I graduated from CRES, and then I started working with dogs, and I got certified. And everything I did from that point forward just felt natural to bring a CRES lens into it. Mm-hmm. And it was not until I started going to conferences that I realized this was an incredibly valuable skill, and the tools that I were using in conversation with my clients to get better training outcomes and to help them in a better way were things that I wanted to share and I felt there was a need for, and that people were just they had a little bit of it, but they were missing. And so that's kind of how it all comes together.
Wow. That is an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it just really, that's an incredible journey that you've been on. And you were mentioning, how could we bring conflict resolution and dog training together? But look at you now. You're here talking about it, and it totally makes sense and it resonates with me. So I kind of want to talk more about, since we're on an aggression podcast and a dog training podcast, we should, what are some of the common things? Because you do a lot of separation anxiety work and I do a lot of aggression work. And, people think when you hear conflict, that word conflict, you're like, all right, this is like we're fighting or arguing over something, but it's not always that. It might just be the disagreement or differing thoughts. So let's kind of dive into what are some common maybe experiences in your separation anxiety work where you're seeing what we would call like a conflict?
Sure. Yeah. I think this is such a great question because regardless of whether, and I think our two worlds come together in a really interesting way, is regardless of if it's separation anxiety or a case that's coming to me with a dog that's having trouble being home alone, or you're dealing with a reactive, aggression case, the reality is that when people find us and they're coming to us, they are usually in crisis. They are usually at a point in time where other things have failed spectacularly. And they are reaching out for help and pretty much at the end of their emotional rope. And what they are looking for is really a rescue. They're looking for someone to help rescue the situation because they have nowhere else to turn. So I really appreciate this question. And what often comes up for me is in these cases when people come is like holding space for them. It's really, honestly, the beginning process of any consult that I have or any client that I work with is I find it my responsibility, and I take it very seriously, to hold space for them and to pull in that CRES part of, my education and give them that space where they feel safe and they feel comfortable enough and not judged. So suspending judgment is a huge part of this, that they feel safe enough to be able to express what they're feeling. But then we also have those people that come to us in these cases, whether it's aggression or separation anxiety, that want help, but also hold their emotions and their feelings very close to their chest because of past experiences. So, and in that first session, somebody may not just spew their feelings and their emotions and everything on the table. There's work to be done there. There's work to be done in valuing what somebody has to offer to the table. So I go into every single consult assuming that I have something to learn from this client. They have something to teach me. And I know that they are contacting me because they are looking for actionable things, and we feel the pressure as behavior consultants to provide those actionable things. In aggression, clearly a priority is going to be safety in that first meeting, setting up a safe situation for the trainer and everybody to walk into. And then 2, I want to take a look at that assumption of I have something to learn from you. And yes, I feel the pressure of giving you actionable things, but it's not my job to convince you need to do this. It's my job to listen and be able to find those little nuggets that tell me what's going on for you and what your lived experience is and what you're willing and able to put forward before we meet the next time. And that's where we're going to go. We're going to put those management pieces in place, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to do one single actionable thing.
I'd love to jump into some of the skills and tools here that we can use for these conversations. One of the things I always just scream out there is the empathy part of it. Having empathy is such a crucial skill for anybody doing behavior consulting work because of those emotions you were talking about. Let's face it, when we're talking behavior cases like separation anxiety or aggression, we need to have empathy because of that. People being at the end of their emotional rope, as you just mentioned. So in addition to empathy, let's dive into some skills. What do you typically recommend? Let's say we have some new trainers like, okay, this sounds great. I love training dogs, but don't really know much about people, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. And, there's a misconception to the general public that, we get to play with dogs all day. This is, and we do on some level. We get to work and, it's the joy of our lives and we love doing it. But there's a whole other element there. And for trainers, we are really skilled, and we spend a lot of time and invest a lot of time in understanding how to read canine body language and understanding what a dog is feeling and what a dog may be experiencing through the body language and the carriage in which the way that they're carrying themselves, how they're reacting to things in their environment, how they're reacting to people, how they're reacting to sound, how they're reacting to being home alone, like all of those things. But we're very skilled at that. What we have let fall away in that formula is how well are we reading the people in front of us? How well are we noticing those small little shifts that we might notice in a dog's ear carriage? Literally, an ear shifting back and forth would mean something to us that we're not paying attention to in the people in front of us. So whenever I'm doing a consult, I want to pay really close attention to the nonverbal communication that people are giving me. It's a gift. They are gifting me with this information, and I receive it as a gift, right? You'll see a shift. You'll say something, you'll present it, and we don't know what's going to hit the mark or not hit the mark with people when we're saying it. We're just providing information given what we're seeing, the conversation at hand. And I'm always watching for an eye shift, a shift in weight, a shift in their feet. Did they tap their toes? What are they doing with their hands? Do we see them close their mouth a little bit tighter? Do we see them glance away and disengage for a second and then come back into it? That's a gift. When I see that happen, I take note of what were we talking about? What was the language that I used? And then I have an opportunity to just kind of pause, to take that pause and say, what's coming up for you? When I say this, what's coming up for you? Because I notice this is happening.
I like that. Yeah.
And actually give them the platform and opportunity instead of I keep talking and I keep giving them all this information. I need to read the room, and I need to be really as skilled at reading the room and reading the people as I am at reading the dog.
Yes. It's such an important point. Well, first of all, I'm not playing poker with you anytime soon. But so if a new trainer's starting out in consulting, is there a particular resource you recommend to learn more about human body language, or do you have like a couple go-tos just really briefly off the top of your head?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, you can do just a general search on human body language, and there are like wonderful websites on the just subtleties of weight shifts, eye glances. Does somebody sit up a little bit straighter? Do they lean away? Do they shift their weight away? That kind of thing that tell me they're disengaging from me a little bit. I've lost them. So I need to stop and figure out what's going on for them. Why have I lost them? And so honestly, I just would recommend for any new trainer out there that they just do a general search and start looking into basic human body language and start applying it into like everyday conversations they're even having at home with their family. And when they see a shift, note it and just be like, ask and engage with that and just be like, what's coming up for you? What are you thinking? What's happening now? And it's going to give you information. It's like, is what I'm thinking happening actually happening, or am I reading this wrong?
Yes. It's such a beautiful way it's so subtle too, because we could say something else and we might not realize it. That could shut the door at the same time. So it's so subtle, but I love that you're asking the question to really find out where they're at without being judgmental, without accusing them of anything, without getting frustrated ourselves. We're opening that door rather than closing it. I love that particular question right at that moment. So I was just going to kind of shift to other tools you like to use. I want to get as much out of the toolbox that we can in this episode because that one was really good. So what else would you consider in terms of strategies? Maybe like you mentioned earlier before we started, emotional intelligence, and something that I've had to work on my whole life in understanding what that is, and developing more of a emotional, empathetic side to these cases, because it's really a significant part of these cases that we work.
Yeah, absolutely. Emotional intelligence is everything. So the next piece of what I would want to introduce to any new trainer, or even any experienced, well-versed trainer out there that's been doing this for a long time, and they feel really comfortable talking to people in these really difficult situations. Because what will happen sometimes in our training sessions is we will hit resistance. We will meet with resistance of either I absolutely don't believe in my dogs going on medications. I only am going to give you about 4 weeks of time, and I got to see if this is going to work. So we feel the pressure of time. They may have core beliefs, and we'll talk about a little bit. We can go into core beliefs after this if you want, but they may have a whole history and belief system in aversive tools because it's what they were raised with. It's what their history is in. And they're reaching out to somebody in positive reinforcement for a reason. They're interested. They're dipping their toe in the water, but I can easily push them out of that. And so I have to be really mindful and careful about how I do it. And so there's a lot of resistance, and we can just have a flat out disagreement with somebody when we're in a training session of like, I absolutely am not going to do that. I don't agree with it. And then we find ourselves in a situation where it's like, okay, we got to take a step back. Help me understand why. What's happening here? But so to give you emotional intelligence, if we're going to kind of go down that road, that would be the next thing. So the first thing is I'm really, I'm welcoming them. I'm trying to, I'm suspending judgment, which is huge. Every day is a practice in suspending judgment for me. I am a work in progress. We're really good at judging. I'm super good at it. I think most people are. It's normal. It's a normal part of how we live. It's a normal part of life. And so learning to hear something come at you and kind of practice that poker face and not show that, I don't like that one. Okay. We're going to go round and round about this one. We're going to suspend judgment because their lived experience is theirs. It's not mine. And it's valid. Whatever it is, it's valid. And so emotional intelligence turns the table on us. It's not about what we're getting from our clients. It turns the table on us. And what emotional intelligence really breaks down into is these 5 different pieces. So there's self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, which we've kind of touched on a little bit, we'll go into a little more, and social skills. And so when I'm turning the table on me, when I have somebody disagree, or I see something, or I experience something that triggers a feeling or emotion in me, and I don't know what that's going to be for anybody, but I know like there are certain things, certain phrases, certain things that are going to trigger something for me in a training situation. I need to know what is my understanding of my emotions and thoughts, what comes up for me, and then how good am I at receiving that information and having this chain of feelings kind of put into play for myself, but not get put into motion outwardly, right? So it's like, okay, I recognize this is what it makes me feel. And how good am I at regulating that? So that second piece is that self-regulation. I feel it. It's definitely like a pain point for me. And now I'm experiencing these emotions, which kind of shuts the door on like what else I'm going to be able to receive from my client. But then the second piece of emotional intelligence is once I get that information, how good am I at regulating it so that I can exercise emotional restraint, right? So that I can be controlled when triggered to be able to like step outside of it and keep going forward and not putting emotions behind the steering wheel. Because if I let my emotions then in that moment get behind the steering wheel, I've just gone way off track and I'm not going to be able to help these people. I'm not going to be able to help them or their dog that are in front of me. And then empathy. My emotional intelligence would be, I'm looking at empathy from 2 different perspectives. I'm looking at it from an emotional empathy perspective and then from a cognitive empathy perspective. And so cognitive empathy is I can appreciate and understand what somebody else is experiencing and explaining to me and I can kind of relate it to other life experiences I may have had, but I may not have had that exact same experience with a dog. But I can certainly empathize with how difficult and what a crisis moment this is for this family, for these people. Whereas emotional empathy is, I've had the same experience. I totally can tap into what you're feeling, and I know that it's there. I can play both of those pieces interchangeably, because I don't have to have had the same experience to be empathetic towards somebody, and I shouldn't have to have had the same experience. So my emotional intelligence is how well am I able to extend that part of myself to them while I'm emotionally regulating if I feel triggered by something, right? And then I'm thinking about what's the motivation. So in my emotional intelligence piece, what's motivating this conversation? It's not that it should never be that I want recognition, that I want money, that I want any, I'm looking forward in that way. Motivation needs to come from a place of self-improvement and self-development. I want to be motivated to be better at these conversations and to help these people in this moment the best that I can. And then that improves my social skills and my ability to help them.
That's so well put, because it really got me thinking about, because we're kind of looking at both sides of the equation here. We're looking at the client side and their belief systems. We're looking at the trainer side or the consultant side. And it had me thinking about how much we might actually sabotage our own behavior plans and our own success in the case because of our belief systems. And it's definitely something I've become aware of in my consulting work over the years. Let's say it's a client that tells you, I pin my dog down, I take a newspaper out, and you hear all these awful things that we have a visceral response to. And when we're in a profession that often most of us start off because we're caring about the dogs, we're really focused on the dog's welfare and those kind of things. We hear about those horror stories and can have such an emotional impact on us. And then we find ourselves sitting in front of a client and they're telling us these things. What are your recommendations for people that might be at that moment? They're like, okay, I haven't quite been able to just brush these things off, or, this all sounds great, learning emotional intelligence, but how do you actually get to that step? And what do you suggest for developing that skill? Because it is a skill, and it's not something that you can just develop overnight. Be like, oh yeah, you're seeing animal abuse, and then suddenly you're sitting in front of a client telling you those things. But we have to remain professional if we're going to truly help that animal and the client.
Yeah, that's a really well said, really well stated, and such a great question, because you're right. I personally, if I see a dog chained outside, it's really hard for me. And you're right. Clients are going to come to us and they're going to say things and they're going to present a story, a history of this dog that may have pieces to it that are extremely offensive to me. So if you're new in this, the first thing that I would say is be kind to yourself. Give yourself some grace, right? None of us are perfect. I am still, every single day, this is something I work at. It's something that I continue to work at. I would never say I'm an expert at it, but I would say I am well practiced at it. Okay. I would never call myself an expert in doing this, but I would embrace that I'm well practiced. And so the first thing that I would tell people is give yourself some grace. And if you want to practice your emotional intelligence, one of the better ways to do it is just in anytime you're watching the news or anytime you're watching something that something comes up on your feed, right, on social media that triggers you, that absolutely sets an emotion and a feeling and a mood in place, right? We get that chain reaction. The first thing that I want people to start doing is when they feel that, the first thought that often comes to mind is, I've got to prove that that's not correct. I've got to prove that that's wrong. And I've got to express it, and I'm going to fight to the death on this. Avoid taking that step. And I want you to take a breath and take a step back. And I want you to think about and start really processing for ourselves. Why do I feel this way? Why does this trigger this response in myself? Because I can't help somebody else if I don't even understand why this is such an important visceral thing for me. It doesn't mean that, I'm always going to get there and I'm always going to have an understanding, but I'm going to keep working at that. I'm going to take that step back. I'm going to pause. And I want to say, what's happening for me? Why do I feel so strongly about this? And I lean into a thing called if anybody's ever heard me talk publicly, you will hear me speak about a feelings wheel. I love the feelings wheel because what it is, and there's websites for it and things, but I often use a feelings wheel, and I've used it inside work that I've done with inmates in incarcerated populations. Because what happens is like we have these core beliefs. And so what ends up happening in the feelings wheel is like, so we have happy, angry, sad, and then we have frustrated, whatever. But whatever's on the positive side, these are needs that are being met. Anytime we have something negative that we feel or is occurring for us, then we are hitting and touching on a need, an emotional need for ourselves that is not being met. And unless we really start to explore and uncover the feeling behind it, understanding why we feel that way and what need isn't being met or understood, we're never going to flip it to the other side. So on a feelings wheel, the negative side or those unmet needs are always on the opposites, just directly opposite of the needs that are being met. And what happens is those core beliefs are generally what people express. They're like, I'm angry, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, whatever. But the reality is like what we're seeing is we're perceiving it as that, but it actually is filtered out into maybe I'm not angry, maybe I'm just feeling really isolated or lonely, and this is really hard for me, right? And so I can help use that feelings wheel to identify what somebody might be feeling. I'm not labeling it. I'm not putting it on them. It's like, I think this is what's happening, and I can help explore that. So I can do that for myself as well. If something comes up for me and I'm watching the news and there's another school shooting, or there's another thing that's happening in the world that I just don't understand, I approach it differently. Instead of, it creates this whatever emotional chain reaction in myself, I take a step back and I'm like, why do I feel that way? And if I'm looking at it and understanding it, then I have a much better understanding of what needs to be met in order for me to move forward with that. And it's the same thing for our clients. It's the same thing. It's like they're going to put out these like feelings. And if I can help them in any way understand what the root of those expressions and those experiences are, then I can understand what isn't being met. And together we can create goals. And we can create training goals. But so in a very long roundabout way of answering your question, Mike, if I'm looking at how do I improve my skills, I would start with anything that triggers me and just identifying what it is I feel and taking a look at like when that happens, what's the history behind that feeling? What's the history when that occurs that makes me feel that way? It's not right or wrong. I'm not trying to fix it. I'm not trying to answer it. I'm just trying to understand it. Because unless I understand it, I'm never going to be able to crack the door to meeting the need to get outside of that cycle.
I love everything you just said there, because when you think about it, it's just a parallel to dogs, of course, that we're working with, and understanding the cause rather than just looking at the symptoms, right? And the expression of our feelings that happen. Without understanding the reasoning, we can't help that person or animal. So I'm loving how this conversation's going. But we're going to take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. If you're interested in hearing more about applicable and immediate steps you can use with your own dog, or in your cases, I have a subscription series called Help for Dogs with Aggression, which is an additional format to this podcast where I walk you through a variety of aggression issues. Some of the topics already in the episode library that you would receive immediate access to include territorial aggression, emotions and aggression, dog-to-dog resource guarding, dogs that bite when being pet or handled, aggression on leash, and a bunch more. These are solo shows where I take you step by step on how to work with each of these types of aggression. You'll find a little subscribe button on Apple Podcasts where the bitey end of the dog is listed, or a link in the show notes to subscribe using Supercast. Your support of the show is very much appreciated. And don't forget to join me for the 5th annual Aggression in Dogs Conference, either in person or online, from Scottsdale, Arizona, from October 11th to 13th, 2024. This year's lineup includes many incredible speakers, including Dr. Clive Wynn, Veronica Putel, and Gina Ferris, Sarah Rodriguez, and Jess Arachi, Emma Parsons, Sarah Colnice, Dr. Kelly Moffitt, Sam Freeman, Dr. Amy Cook, and many more. Head on over to aggressivedog.com and click on the conference tab to learn more about the exciting agenda on everything from advanced concepts in dog body language to working with aggression in shelter environments to genetic influences on behavior. Dr. Amy Cook is also going to be bringing her entertaining and energetic personality to the grand reception and cocktail party, which, by the way, will be live streamed as well as in person. And as usual, you'll find a wonderful, kind, caring, and supportive community at the conference, both in person and online. And I want to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors for the conference. As a family of world-class trainers, Fenzi Dog Sports Academy provides expert and accessible instruction for competitive dog sports using the most progressive training methods and positive reinforcement techniques. Through their online platform, students are able to access professional dog training no matter your location or pup's skill level. FDSA believes the bond between dog and human is a proud and life-changing partnership, and they will work with you to develop a respectful and kind relationship with your furry best friend. Check out FDSA at fenzidogsportsacademy.com. All right, we're back here with Carm. We've been talking about conflict resolution amongst many other things that have been really helpful for me as well, and really unpacking all of the human side of the work we do. And, we were just talking about tools, and you had mentioned social media too. I think that'd be helpful for a lot of our listeners, because one of the most significant struggles I hear from trainers and consultants and my students is the impact of social media, where they kind of need it sometimes to market. I mean, some people disagree with that, but let's face it, we are in a social media society where people find your business and through social media, so you sometimes have to be on it, and there's a lot of boundaries you have to draw if you're going to be healthy, really emotionally healthy. It can be challenging when you're on social media. So what are the differences? Like, we have, when we're in person with a client, we have the time, we can see the body language, we can have a much longer conversation versus social media. So what are your recommendations for trainers and consultants listening that have to deal with the trainer wars and all the conflicts that can happen on social media?
It's such a good question. And it's a really powerful question, quite honestly, because we live in a social media world. We live in a digital world where we really rely on these tools, like you said, to build our business and to provide information and help to people that we want to give. So I think the biggest challenge of social media, quite honestly, is all of those tools that I use for conflict resolution in reading the room, reading somebody else's body language, reading, all of those things that will cue me into asking more questions, trying to understand how they feel, trying to uncover what their history is. Because if I'm not considering their history, I'm not able to really fully understand where they're coming from and what's going to be the next step in my training approach. So what happens in social media is all of that gets removed. All of those pieces that I really rely and lean into heavily to understand what's happening for somebody get removed. And so all I'm faced with is sometimes something really ugly coming at me, where somebody could be either attacking my methods or attacking the methods that I align with, or could be just saying something not so pleasant that's going to trigger me. And social media has become this place where bullying becomes very, very easy, and bullying without repercussions. And so I'm a really big believer in the difference between accountability and responsibility. We'll kind of break that down a little bit. Responsibility is, I take responsibility for it. I did that. I fully understand. I own it. Right? Accountability is, I own it, I did that, and what do I need to do to repair the harms that I've caused? What do I need to do to make reparations for what's just occurred or what's happened? And so people in social media don't need to be either. They don't really necessarily have to be responsible or accountable to the things that they're saying, which is difficult at best. And so what I often encourage people to do is, when something triggers them and something comes at them, quite honestly, I wouldn't engage in the conversation. It is a black hole for you. It is not a place where anything productive or any conversation of any value is really going to take place, simply because you aren't able to read the room. And quite honestly, unless somebody is really willing to engage in that conversation and have that conversation with you so that you can better understand one another, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to continue to try to throw facts at one another or throw shade at one another to prove your point. And the reality is that facts don't change people's minds. They don't. We can throw all the facts in the world that we want about the research done on positive reinforcement training and all the things that we know in the literature about aversive methods and things that don't work and the fallout of all of those things. And it's never going to change somebody's mind or position. The only thing that does is when you invest in somebody that's willing to have a conversation so that you can understand where they're coming from better. Because once we understand them and we understand the history behind it, we have an opportunity then. We've opened the door a little bit for them to try something that we're suggesting. But in social media, that opportunity is void and nil. It's not an opportunity that's available. So when you find yourself triggered by something said, I would honestly not engage, take a moment, give yourself some grace. And the question I would ask myself, honestly, in that moment is, I wonder what's happening for them, and I wonder what's happening in their history that makes them align so heavily with this belief.
Yes.
And
Yes.
leave it at that.
Yes, exactly. I think I should package everything you just said there because it's such gold advice. It's something that I wish I knew, when I first started out, 5-10 years ago, I'm getting into some social media conflicts and, reacting. So that's the sort of the key phrase, sort of like we talk about dogs that are reactive. If you're reactive, you're going to often just get reacted back, right? You're going to get a response from whatever you're reacting to. So the travesty for me too is that, in my position, I get a lot of people that will reach out to me or folks that are trying to get on speaking engagements, just put their information out there. But the travesty for me is that there's some folks out there that are afraid to do any of that because of the potential criticisms that they might face or the critical comments or any kind of negativity that can happen on social media and that's just so sad because there's so much talent and knowledge and information that is not getting out there because it's getting stifled. And so if you're listening in right now and you're one of those folks that you want to put a message out there, I highly encourage you, just do it. Do it and then take Carm's wonderful advice and pair it with that. And that's how you can often survive that social media environment while getting the message you want to put out there into the mainstream. So that was just a top of mind thought for me, but it really was, I think, important to say that because I don't want people, good talent, not getting out there because we're just doing damage to the dogs and to the people we're trying to help because that information is not getting out there. So do what you got to do and put it out there is my message there. Let's continue on. What other tools or what else is top of mind for you in this conversation where you would love to also add into this?
Yeah, I think what's really top of my mind that I want to kind of circle back to is because I do conflict resolution and because this is like really front and center in how I approach any conversation and particularly all of my training conversations, it doesn't mean that it's going to end well. Okay. So the idea that like resolution is in that, phrase doesn't mean resolution is going to always happen. And it doesn't mean that it's going to feel good. Conflict doesn't feel good. I have the same visceral response that everybody else has when something gets really hard or somebody comes at me or all the time. You can be in the middle of a conversation, even with, clients that you've been working with, or even those that you're just meeting for the first time. And you're kind of blindsided and surprised by how aggressively somebody might come at you with something, that difference of opinions. For me, though, what I have to remember is that when somebody else is giving me a very emotional, visceral response, that's gold. That's absolutely the gold I'm looking for because that's the gold that I need to explore. That's the gold I need to kind of dip my toe into in order to be able to really understand and help them. But so these conversations are not always going to go well. They're not, we're not going to like do this huge process and really understand people. And we're limited in time. We're limited in the time that we have in our consults and our time to work with them. And so we have to really kind of outside of these moments, work on those separate pieces and get better at them and pull them in where they're needed when we need them. And then sometimes we have to just agree to disagree. And it's okay to do that. Every conversation is not going to end well. And you're going to walk away going, oh God, okay, that didn't end nearly as well. I should have done this or this or this, or this would have gone better if I had, we always think in retrospect of all the things we should have done. And so I often want people to create what I call a wishing well. And the wishing well is after a conversation, if it didn't feel good, it didn't feel great, I want you to put in that wishing well the things that you wish you had done better. And then you keep working at those things because those things will keep coming up and you keep working at those things. But the next piece would be, I want to really kind of talk a little bit deeper about what informs beliefs and where people are coming from when they come to us. Because whether it's an aggression case, whether it's a separation anxiety case, there are things that people will come into a session, they come with core beliefs, and they may be very, very different than ours. So core beliefs are those things that really give us a lens into how we view and perceive the world in front of us. And for everybody, that's different. We are not born with core beliefs. We are not born with them. These are things that we learn through life experiences and as we move through the world. It's the things in trauma. It's the things in childhood that have informed the beliefs. It's the things that we've been modeled. All of those things. It's the communities that we live in, the places that we work, and all of these things that put us in a community that support our beliefs, right? Because we often will put ourselves in communities where our beliefs are supported because it's uncomfortable to go outside that. So when we're now in a conversation where I'm presenting information, they're interested, but I'm presenting information or I'm seeing something that completely counters and goes against their core beliefs, I need to take a step back and I need to understand it. And so I'm going to spend some time really trying to understand what their history is, because everybody comes to the table with a history. And if I'm just assuming that I'm going to railroad through and just brush aside what their core beliefs are or what they're asking, when they're asking for help, what might be stopping them from actually moving forward with that help, then I've missed a huge piece of the puzzle. And so I want to spend some time really trying to understand what's somebody's history with this. So, for example, we have clients that are just like, all the time, like you said, they're going to say things in that initial consult that you have to have that poker face. You're going to suspend judgment because it's like, as an example, I had a client come in and when I was working reactivity and aggression cases before I was doing separation anxiety, and he just had this real firm footing in the aversive dominance world. And he had a pit bull, which was lovely. It was this lovely little pitty. Loved this girl. She was such a sweet girl. And so we have a couple of dynamics happening here. We have like this dog that's having these reactive moments and showing some aggression. We have an owner that is really leaning into aversive tools and believes he needs to dominate his dog because his dog needs to know that he's boss. And then we have the wife who is on the sidelines and doesn't necessarily agree with him. So we have two differing opinions occurring between husband and wife. And I'm finding myself kind of in the middle of a therapy session of I have to uncover what's happening between them, because unless we get both people finding a common goal, I'm not going to be able to help move them forward. So a lot of that comes into what's the history for him? He has a whole history and a whole, background in why he believes so firmly in aversive tools. Why does he believe so heavily that he needs to dominate his dog? So we went there. We had that conversation. We gave the dog something to do. The dog was doing fine in the room. And we had that conversation, which helped me understand and also helped him understand a little bit better the concerns that his wife was having and why she was afraid and why he wasn't afraid. And that way we could come to one single common goal. And that's what we worked on for the next 2 to 3 weeks. And when he started to see the relationship with his dog change by not dominating him, then the door cracked open a little wider to try something else and to try something else and to try something else. And he took the choke chain, he took the prong collar off of this dog. He stopped being aversive. He stopped trying to dominate him. And mainly, unbeknownst to him, it's because he allowed himself to express and had the opportunity to be heard and understood in a way that nobody had listened, instead of just trying to tell him why that wasn't going to work.
Amazing. Amazing transformation too. And what I would sense is a short time in my experience too, for a paradigm shift like that to happen. Would be wonderful to be a fly on the wall during a consult with you, just to see the navigation of the conversation. In terms of that, I'd love to kind of, before we wrap up, talk about some of the resources too that are available out there. We know there's limited resources for dog trainers and consultants, so there's some books, like some of my favorites, like The Human Half of Dog Training with Dr. Risa Van Fleet, Crucial Conversations, Never Split the Difference. Those are some of the common ones that are talking about conversational skills. But one that's sort of, I wouldn't call it new, but newer to the dog training world is nonviolent communication. Do you want to talk more about that? Or maybe even the topic of it?
Oh, you are just like lighting up my world. Yes, absolutely. Because where all this leads to are in conflict resolution and mediation and facilitation skills is nonviolent communication. And this is where it all kind of filters down into. So we have all of these other things at play that we're considering, right? That we've talked about, that we've discussed. And how do we apply it into actual tools and skills in the moment? And what it comes down to is nonviolent communication. And what nonviolent communication is it's broken down into 4 steps, 4 very simple steps. Simple, although not so simple, because it takes practice to actually rehearse them. But the first step is observation. And so observation is, when you're doing a consult, your first step is observation. It's not judgment. You're suspending judgment. You're not putting any labels on anything. You're not doing any of that. It's facts only. What are you seeing? And if somebody's expressing an emotion, what is it that you're seeing? Just observations only. That's the important first step. The second step is going to be feelings, right? So you observed this. And so then what you have an opportunity to do is mirror back the feelings that they're expressing. It's like, so when I said that, when we were talking about this, or you were describing this behavior in your dog, I noticed that your voice got a little bit more intense. You were talking about dominance. There was, things got a little harder for you. Can you help me understand what's happening and what comes up for you there? Because what's happening is I want to explore and I want to understand. I want to make sure that when I'm mirroring back, they understand that I heard that I understood, and I'm actually listening and I'm hearing what their experience is. I'm not judging it. I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just trying to repeat back, what were the feelings that you were experiencing as you were describing that situation? Are you totally embarrassed? Are they expressing complete embarrassment by what their dog is? What are their goals and expectations of this dog that might be unrealistic? Fine, but like, what are you feeling? Why do you feel like that's so important to you? Why do you feel like this dog that has a huge history in aggression and a few bites needs to be a therapy dog? What's happening there? Right? Why do you feel that? But I need to understand and mirror back, like, I've observed this. What are you feeling? Right? When I see this, what comes up for you? Or when you said this. And then needs. So when we're talking about feelings, just like we did in that feelings wheel. So now we're like tapping into, I've noticed this. Are you feeling this when I say this? And let them have an opportunity to kind of explain and expand and say more about it. Then needs. So what would you need? Ask them, give them the opportunity. It's just like, so maybe what you need is to feel a little more secure and safe when you go on a walk so you don't get drugged through a ditch. I get that. Okay, that makes sense to me. And let them, so what I'm looking for in any conversation is that moment where a client says to me, yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. Because if I've done my job correctly here, then I've listened to them, I've observed it, I've been able to mirror back what I've observed or what I've heard them say and ask them what feelings, if I haven't really identified a feeling, what do you feel when I say that or when you're saying that? And then identify, when you're feeling that, what do you need? What's the need that needs to happen here? And then what's the one actionable request? Given that, then would you be willing to try this? I can make a request, or they can make a request of, I need to just be able to walk my dog and feel safe. Mm-hmm. So it really comes down to nonviolent communication. I was at a conference and it was the first time I'd seen the nonviolent communication book at the Dogwise table. And I literally almost like jumped. I mean, I was so excited. Yes. And I talked to them. I was like, who put this book out? Who put this book here? Who put this book on the table? So the people at the Dog Wise table were not so sure that was a book that really belonged there. And I was like, this book absolutely belongs here because it's not about dog training. That book is not about dog training, but the book is about how to employ these 4 steps: observation, feelings, needs, and requests into actionable things in how we have any conversation. And if you practice it, what you're going to find is how you approach your consults and how you approach a training session are going to be different. And what you will also find is you are developing a stronger connection and a stronger mode of communication with your clients. And you're going to have better buy-in from your clients, and you're going to have better training outcomes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And if I had to guess, it would be Erica Austin, who works with Dog Wise. Probably Erica. Put it there. She's amazing.
Loved her. I was just like, I literally hugged her. I'm like, keep this book on the tables.
She's doing great work for Dog Wise as well as the rest of the dog training community. So shout out to Erica.
Incredible.
Yes. And you're going to be speaking of conferences, you're going to be speaking at the Aggression in Dogs conference. So I'm really excited for that one. Real quick, what are you focusing there? What's your focus going to be on for the topic?
Yeah, I'm super excited to have the opportunity to actually present this material because I feel like there's a lot of people really kind of skimming the surface of this, and they've got some skills. They've got some things happening. They just don't have the bigger picture and understand how to pull it all together. So what I'm going to be talking about at the conference is we're going to dive into each of these things. We're going to dive into human body language. We're going to dive into, core beliefs. We're going to dive into emotional intelligence, the feelings wheel, and actually how to apply these tools in what you do in your work, regardless of whether it's shelter work or whether it's, you're facing time limitations, you're doing aggression, you're doing separation anxiety, or you're just teaching classes and you're meeting resistance and not being able to convert those people that are reaching out to you into training packages. And why might that be happening? So I'm going to be diving into all of those things, and we're going to go do a deeper dive into nonviolent communication and how to actually use those tools and those skills to improve the way that you're having conversations and how to change the course when things feel ugly, when they don't feel good, and suddenly you find yourself in a situation you hadn't planned on being in.
I'm really looking forward to that. And what else do you have coming up this year? Where else can people find you?
So where they can find me, I live in Oregon. I'm in Springfield, and I'm kind of living a quiet little life here. I run North Star Training Solutions in Oregon, and I only work separation anxiety. It's the thing I primarily focus on. I'm a CSAT. I'm a certified separation anxiety trainer, also on staff with Milena DiMartini. So I'm doing cases and work with her as well. I just give local talks, quite honestly, on both. I've given a few talks to the CSAT community on difficult conversations, mainly directed towards that community, and covered this. And then also just done some separation anxiety talks. But I am always open and happy to talk to anybody if they don't want to wait till the conference and they need to reach out to me and they're just like, okay, I heard your podcast. This was really great. These are tools that I feel like I need. They can reach me at my email. They could always email me at carm@northstartraining.info. And I am always happy to consult and help people kind of navigate the slippery slope when things go south.
Wonderful. Carm, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you at the conference.
Thank you, Mike. This was so fun. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. I could talk about this all day long. So clearly you can, as you can tell. So I really appreciate the platform.
Great. Thank you. It was absolutely wonderful chatting with Carm, and I picked up some really great insights that I think I'll be using in my conversations, both in my dog behavior consulting practice and I think life in general. This might sound cliche, but I know the world will be a better place if conflict resolution became part of our mainstream culture. And don't forget to head on over to aggressivedog.com for more information about helping dogs with aggression. From the Aggression in Dogs Master Course to webinars from world-renowned experts and even an annual conference, we have options for both pet pros and pet owners to learn more about aggression in dogs. We also have the Help for Dogs with Aggression bonus episodes that you can subscribe to. These are solo shows where I walk you through how to work with a variety of types of aggression, such as resource guarding, dog-to-dog aggression, territorial aggression, fear-based aggression, and much, much more. You can find a link to subscribe in the show notes or by hitting the subscribe button if you're listening in on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening in, and as always, stay well, my friends.